Hi everyone, in this video we'll be going over A-Level Accounting 2023 October-November Paper 3-2 question number 2. This is the structured paper 3 which consists of 3 questions. Each of them will be of 25 marks and the total time limit given for this paper is 1 hour and 30 minutes, which means that ideally you should be spending about 30 minutes in order to solve each question. And in this video as well, we'll be attempting to solve this question number 2 under 30 minutes. So without any further delay, let's get started. The BU Club is a club providing sports facilities to its members. It also holds tournaments for which it awards prizes, and the club admits life members as well as ordinary members. Its assets and liabilities were as follows. So we're given the assets and liabilities at 31st May 2023 as well as 31st May 2022. So these are our opening balances and these are our closing balances. Alright, we're given the non-current assets, carrying value, that's the net book value. We're given the cash at bank, subscriptions in arrears, subscriptions received in advance. These are the assets and liabilities. So let's categorize whether or not it's an asset or liability. So this is a non-current asset. Cash at bank is definitely an asset. Subscriptions in arrears just means that we are yet to receive this income. So this is the receivables, which will be a part of our assets. Then there's subscriptions received in advance. So we've already received the payment, but we are yet to provide the services for this payment. So this will be our liability. There's prepaid tournament expenses. So we have already paid out the expenses, but we are yet to receive the services for it. This will be our asset. Then there's accrued tournament expenses, which we are yet to pay. That's a liability. Inventory of tournament prizes. Inventories are always assets. Then there's accrued wages. These are the wages we are yet to pay. These will also be liabilities. Then the following information is also available. There is a life membership fund on 31st May 2022, which is the opening date, which amounted to 5,100. Then the total receipts at the club for the year was as follows. So we received 28,600 as part of the subscriptions. Then there's life membership fees as well as the tournament entry fees. The payments made by the club for the year included the following. We made the payments for tournament prizes and tournament expenses. Then on 31st May 2022, the club had 7 life members. Okay, so this belongs to 7 life members. Then 4 new members took out life membership during the year. So during the year, we got a payment of 4,000 from our life membership fees. So these belong to 4 life members. Okay. And the life membership fund is released to the income and expenditure account at the rate of 100 for each life member at the end of the year. So for the year 2023, we have to take out 100 for each of the 7 existing life members and 4 new life members. Then during the year ended 31st May 2023, overdue subscriptions of 500 were considered irrecoverable and written off. So these are the irrecoverable subscriptions. This should be adjusted when calculating the subscriptions for the year for our income and expenditure account. The new non-current assets were bought during the year. The total depreciation charged for the year was 8,050. The wages cost incurred during the year was 16,970. Okay. Now for the first part of this question, we need to calculate the balance on the life membership fund after the transfer to the income and expenditure account. Okay, so at the start of the year, we had 5,100 in our life membership fund. Then 4 new life members paid out 4,000. So this should also be added into our life membership fund. And remember that each year, 100 per life member is to be taken out to the income and expenditure account. And in this case, we have 7 plus 4 life members. So that's a total of 11 life members. So for 11 of those members, we have to take out 100 for each life member. And we need to release it to the income and expenditure account. And after releasing it, the same amount should be subtracted from the life fund as well. So we need to subtract it. That is just going to be minus 11 times 100. And this gives the balance on the life membership fund after the transfer to the income and expenditure account on 31st May 2023 to have the value of 8,000. Now for the second part, we need to calculate the surplus or deficit for the year ended 31st May 2023 by comparing the values of the accumulated fund. Okay, in this case, we are given all of our assets and liabilities, and there's also a life membership fund. So life membership fund is included right after our capital. So this can be a part of the liabilities as well. At the opening date, we had the fund to be of 5,100 At the closing date, we calculated it in the first part to be 8,000. Now remember our accounting equation, asset will be equal to capital plus liabilities, right? Which means that capital is just going to be asset minus liabilities. And in this case, since we're talking about a club, capital is just going to be accumulated fund. And we need to figure out the accumulated fund at the opening date as well as the closing date. So we just need to subtract all of the liabilities from the given asset. Let's calculate it for our opening date. So this is an asset, we add it. This is an asset, we add it. Again, we add this, subtract it, add it, subtract it, add it, subtract it, and subtract it. Okay, so the total difference, which is going to be the accumulated fund at the opening date, is just going to be 78,000 plus 3,200 plus 850 minus 250 plus 520 minus 430 plus 980 minus 650 minus 5,100, which results in 77,120. That's the accumulated fund at the start of the year. Let's write it down. So accumulated fund at the date of 31st May 2022. This is the last year's closing date. And we calculated it to be 77,120. And remember our format for the movement shown in the accumulated fund. We just add the surplus or deficit to our opening accumulated fund. But in this case, we are trying to figure out the surplus or the deficit. So we need to compare it to the accumulated fund at this year's closing date, which is 31st May 2023. So now we repeat the same process, but we're taking the closing values. So that will be 76,500 plus 8,320 plus 450 minus 150 plus 115 minus 445 plus 630 minus 920 minus 8,000, which results in the value of 76,500. Okay, let's write it down. That was 76,500. And remember that the increment in the accumulated fund will occur if there is a surplus, because we add the surplus to the opening accumulated fund. But if the accumulated fund is being decreased, it just means that we subtracted some deficit from our opening accumulated fund. And in this case, we can see that the opening value is greater than the closing value, so there has been a decrease. And this decrease is caused by a deficit. Okay, so we can easily see that there has been a deficit for this year. And the value for deficit will be the difference between these two values. So that's 77,120 minus 76,500, which results in 620. This concludes the second part. Let's move towards the third one. We now need to calculate the profit or loss made on holding tournaments for the year ended 31st May 2023. So we can just create a statement where we add all of the incomes from the tournament and subtract all of the payments regarding the tournaments. Okay, we can start with the tournament entry fees. These will be the incomes because these are the receipts for the club. Let's see if we need to make any adjustment for tournament entry fees. Okay, we're not given anything for our assets and liabilities section regarding tournament entry fees, which means that the total income is just going to be 15,200. So these are the entry fees, which are our income. We need to add it. Okay. Then we have tournament prizes, and these are the payments that we actually made. Let's see if we need to make any adjustments. For tournament prizes, we have right here our inventory of tournament prizes. And remember that the opening inventory was purchased in the last year and it was yet to be used, which means that this opening inventory of 980 worth of tournament prizes was used in the current year. So this will also be the tournament prizes expenses for the current year. We need to add the 980. Then for our closing inventory of tournament prizes, we will be subtracting this amount of 630 because these are the tournament prizes that we purchased during the year, but we are yet to utilize it. So these are not the expenses made on the tournament prizes for the current year. These can be used in the future years. So we need to subtract this amount of 630. Now this gives our expenses on tournament prizes to have the value of 3,150. Let's write it down. These are for tournament prizes worth 3,150. Okay. And there is also tournament expenses of 11,520. And we need to make the adjustment for prepaid tournament expenses as well as the accrued tournament expenses. Let's have a look at the prepaid one. So we have the opening prepayment of 520. So this 520 was already paid for in the last year, but this is for the current year. We just paid it early, which means that we need to add this 520. And the opposite will be the case for our closing value, because this is again a prepayment. We made the payment of 115 in this year, but this is for the expenses for the next year. So we cannot categorize this as expense for the current year. We need to exclude it. So that's minus 115. Now let's look at the accrued. For accrued tournament expenses, the opening balance is 430. So these are the tournament expenses of last year, which we are yet to pay. Again, focus on the last year. So last year expenses cannot be included in current year expenses, so we need to exclude it. That is why we'll be subtracting the 430. And for our closing date, we have 445. So these are the expenses for the current year, which we are yet to pay. Regardless, these are the expenses of the current year, which means that we need to include it. That is why we'll be adding 445. Now this gives the tournament expenses for the year to be 11,940. Let's write it down. Okay, I think that's all regarding the tournament. We included the tournament income as well as the tournament expenses. So we can just figure out whether or not there was a profit or loss. Okay, so that will be the total. 15,200 minus 3,150 minus 11,940, which results in 110. This is a positive amount, which means that there is a profit. This concludes the third part. Let's move towards the fourth one. We now need to prepare the income and expenditure account for the year ended 31st May 2023. And remember that the income and expenditure account is prepared in order to get the surplus or deficit. But in this case, we have already figured out that there will be a deficit of 620, right? That is why in the question itself, we are told that the balancing figure is to be called other operating expenses. So we need to match the operating expenses such that the deficit will remain at 620. Okay, this is for BU Club. And this is the income and expenditure account. And this is for the year ended 31st May 2023. Okay. We can start with our income section. And the very first income is just going to be subscriptions for the year. Okay, for subscriptions for the year, we start with the receipt of our subscriptions. Then we make an adjustment for the subscriptions in arrears and subscriptions in advance. And I think in this case, we also had the irrecoverable subscriptions. We need to adjust this as well. Okay, we start with the subscriptions that we received during the year. That's 28,600. Now let's take a look at the subscription in arrears. Let's start with the opening balance. So this is the 850, which refers to the subscription fees of last year, which are yet to be paid by the members. So the focus here is that these are the fees for last year. So we should not be showing this as the fees of the current year. That is why we should be subtracting the amount of 850. And the opposite will be for our closing balance. So these 450 refer to the subscription fees for the current year, which we are yet to receive. So we need to show it as a subscription for the year by adding it. Now let's take a look at the advance. At the opening date, we had an advance of 250. So these are the subscription paid in the last year, but these were paid for the current year. Because these are the subscription fees for the current year, we need to include this within our subscriptions for the year. That is why we'll be adding the 250. And we'll be doing the opposite for the closing balance of 150. These are the subscription that we have already received in the current year, but these are the subscription fees of the next year. It should be shown in the next year's subscription for the year. So we are excluding it right now. And we have our irrecoverable debts or irrecoverable subscription in this case. So these are the subscription charged for the year, but we didn't receive it. The customer, or the member in this case, will not be able to pay us back the amount of this membership fee. Regardless, this 500 is still the subscription fee for the year. That is why we'll be adding it. Alright, this gives the total for the subscriptions for the year to be 28,800. Let's write it down. 28,800. Okay. Then we also have to include the life membership fees, because we need to transfer 100 for each member from our life membership fund to the income and expenditure account each year. And we've already calculated that for this year, we need to transfer 100 for 11 members. So that's going to be 1100. Then there's also the profit from tournaments. And in this case, the profit was of 110. Let's write it down. Okay. Now for income, we need to check our receipts section. We included the subscription, we included the transfer of life membership fees, and we included the profit from the tournament. So that is all for our income. Let's figure out the total. That will be 28,800 plus 1,100 plus 110, which results in 30,010. Now we can move towards the expenditure section. And for the expenditure, we were given information regarding wages. So the wages cost incurred during the year was 16,970. Focus here on incurred during the year. So these only include the wages for the current year. We've already made the adjustment for our accrued wages in this case. We were given the accrued wages, but we no longer have to adjust it because we're already given the adjusted amount. Let's write it down. Next, we were also given the information regarding depreciation. Right here, the total depreciation charge for the year was 8,050. This will be a part of our expenditure. So that's depreciation of 8,050. Alright, then we also have irrecoverable subscriptions or irrecoverable debts. These will be a part of expenses as well. So irrecoverable debts of 500. Okay. Then these were for life membership, which we've already included. We already included payments, we already included the receipts, we've already included this as part of our life membership fund. And yeah, I think we've utilized everything. So that's all for our expenditure. Now we also need to include the balancing figure called other operating expenses. Okay, we need to figure out its value. And we already know that there was a deficit. And the deficit was of 620. Okay. Now we first need to figure out the total for the expenditure. We can just create an equation because we know that deficit will be expenditure minus income. We have the deficit amount to be 620. We're calculating the expenditure amount, and the total for income is 30,010. Now this gives the total for expenditure to be 620 plus 30,010, which results in 30,630. That's the total for the expenditure. Now we also have to figure out the other operating expenses. So again, we can create an equation because the total of 30,630 is just the sum of these four amounts. So that's 16,970 plus 8,050 plus 500 plus the operating expenses, which means that the operating expenses is just going to be 30,630 minus 16,970 minus 8,050 minus 500, which results in the amount of 5,110. That will be other operating expenses. Okay, this concludes the income and expenditure account. And again, remember to show your workings for the subscriptions for the year within this workings box to get your markings correctly. Now we're given additional information. The managing committee of the club is considering increasing the entry fee for the tournaments by 10% in the coming year. We need to advise the committee whether or not it should increase the entry fee for the tournaments by 10%. Okay, so the first thing that we can say is that even after increasing the entry fee, if the number of participants remain the same, it means that there would be an increase in profit from holding the tournaments, which might eliminate our deficit for the year. Let's write it down. So if the number of participants remain the same, even after increasing the entry fee, the profit from tournaments would increase, which will eliminate the deficit. Okay. And the next thing that we can see is that after increasing the entry fee, this might reduce the number of participants in the tournaments. The demand might decrease for the tournament. Let's write it down. This might reduce the number of participants. Now, based on these factors, you need to give a final decision to the committee. Personally, I would say that the increase in the entry fee of 10% might be too high, and it might even discourage the membership of the club, which would result in lower income from subscription fees. So I would advise the committee to not increase the entry fee for the tournaments by 10%. Let's write it down. The committee should not increase the entry fee for the tournaments by 10%, as it might even discourage membership of the club. Due to high fees. Alright, this concludes the second question. If you found this video useful, make sure you like the video and leave a comment below. And make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so that you do not miss any of these videos in the future. Thank you.